morning everyone and welcome. So I scheduled this session because I want to do a few sessions where we start to look at how our body and all the different joints in our body interact with our feet. So we are going to go through a process where we are going to look at these three things: foot placement, posture, and joint motion. So basically, wherever we might have discomfort in our body, if we haven't got correct foot placement, correct posture, and correct joint motions, it can be very, very difficult to remedy a pain condition. So what we're going to do today, hi Elaine, hello, welcome. What we're going to do today is we're going to go through some very simple processes where I'm going to help you experience your body in a way where you can start to understand a little bit more about what's going on. So whether you've got pain in your feet, pain in your knees, pain in your pelvis, even in your upper body and your neck, we're going to look at how our feet potentially interact with what's going on. So I'm just going to give people a chance to arrive. We've got a few people here already, and then I'm going to start. Now, what I will say is that one of the things I'm offering to do is I've created these sheets. So if you look at this, this is a sheet that shows our body. It's got head, shoulders, back. And with what we're going to do today, what I'm going to encourage is that you document, you do this process a few times and you document and you start to understand where you've maybe got imbalances, where perhaps a shoulder's up, a shoulder's down, where we'll go through all of this in a moment, but where your pelvis may be twisted, something like that. And if you've got these documents, you will be able to mark each day what's happening. So I've also created one, if you can see this is another one I've created, which is for your foot pressure. So, and your foot placement. So one of the things we need to do is we need to understand how our feet connect with the ground. So I've called this a foot diary, and it's where, if you want, I can send you this document. My dog is walking over everything at the moment, but I send you this document. The third thing is where it's a list where it's going to tell you, and I'm going to talk through all of this with you, exactly what you're going to check in with each day. Now, you don't have to do this day after day after day. You could do it once a week for a few weeks. You could do it once every 2 or 3 days. You could do it as much or as little as you want to. But the idea with the process that I'm going to take you through today is that you start to learn to assess your body. So, as I wrote here, we want you to start to see your body differently, okay? What can you move? What can't you move? Okay? So, by the end of today, what I'm hoping is that you're going to understand a little bit more about how your posture and your gravity work, how gravity goes down through your body. How does this potentially contribute to creating pain in your hips or back or feet? And why do we move away? Why, when we're in pain, do we move away from movements that then potentially create more pain? And we're also going to look at how it affects the arches in the feet. So people often say, oh, I've got a flat arch, or I've got a high instep. And we're going to look at how our posture in the rest of our body affects what's actually going on in our feet. Okay, so what we are going to do is come and stand. What I'd like you to do, if you visit this video, I would like you to do this in front of a mirror, okay? When we assess something, very often when we move in space, we have a very, very different concept of what our, sorry, my dog is chewing a bone, a very different concept of what our body is doing compared to what it really is doing. So the best thing to do is to do this in front of a mirror. So today we're going to run through it, but I would really like you to watch this again in front of a mirror. My dog is going to right, is to watch this again in front of a mirror and really look at what your body is doing. Okay, so the first thing I want you to do is stand with your feet hip width apart, okay? And your feet need to be on the floor. Very, very firmly. When I say on the floor, obviously they're on the floor, but each point of the foot we want to balance. So we've got, our foot is this lovely shape, but very often people do very strange things. So if this is your big toe, some people even spend time with that bit off the ground or with this part off the ground. So what I want you to think about is that this part of your heel, okay, and this point here of your big toe and this point here of your little toe are all placed really nicely on the ground for me. So just feel whether you have a sense that your weight is going equally down through both feet. Do you feel you've got more weight going down through your left foot than your right foot? Or does it feel exactly the same? And just take a moment just to feel the weight going down through your feet, and then I'd like you to notice, do you have the same amount of weight going through the heel of your foot and the sole of your foot? If your feet were cut into 4 quarters, so here we have a picture, and you'll see, so we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 quarters, yeah? So if we imagine that we've got 25% of our weight here, 25% there, 25% there, and 25% there. Is that how you are experiencing the weight distributing through your feet? Or maybe on one foot you can feel more weight going down the outside, we call that the lateral side, or the inside, the medial side, and you may well have a very, very different experience in both feet. So there's no wrong or right now, there is just about what are you experiencing, okay? So in your feet, again, if you want the list, all of this on this chart here, I can send this to you so you can fill it in. I want you to just start to feel, what is the experience in my body? And a really nice thing to do is just to breathe, have a sense that your feet are breathing. And you can come back to this. So I'm not going to take ages now with any of these steps because you can continuously come back to this video and I will be doing more of these. So then what I'd like you to do, because this is quite an interesting thing to do, is just to understand the how we can create an arch in our foot and how we create our flat-footedness. So just now that your feet are nicely placed on the ground, and another point being, just take a look down at them, and for a moment I want you to make sure that your big toes are pointing straight ahead. Okay, your big toes and your second toes are pointing straight ahead of you. Now for some people that will feel very normal, and for other people that is going to feel really strange, okay? Because a lot of people spend their time walking or moving with their feet turned out. So it's a big ask for some people to actually ask you to, with your feet hip width apart, to have both of your big toes and your second toes facing forward. So they are facing directionally in the same direction as your eyes, okay? They are looking at the horizon. So now what I'd like you to do with your big toes and your second toes looking forward, if you need to, you can just tuck. It might feel easier if you're someone where this feels really strange. It might then feel easier if you just tuck your pelvis down a little bit, okay? Just a little bit like that. You might go, oh, okay, now that feels okay. So already noticing, just for people who find turning your feet in and straight ahead difficult, just notice whether if you just adjust your pelvis slightly, it feels easier. Okay, so now what we're going to do, because I want you to understand the different sensations between having a flat foot and being able to feel an arch in your foot. So with your hands on your chest, I just want you with your knees locked. Please make sure your knees are locked. So we don't want a bent knee, okay? I want you literally with your feet placed really nicely on the ground to just rotate round. And as you rotate round, keeping your feet really placed nicely, what you should feel, okay, is that one of your feet goes into a lovely arch, into supination, and the other foot becomes much flatter, okay? So already there, you can see how you can create an arch in one foot and flatten the other. Now turn round, rotate in the other direction. Again, keeping those 3 points where you've got the little toe, the big toe and the heel, keeping them glued to the ground and just turning round, knees locked, just rotating round. And again, just notice how in one foot you can create an arch and the other foot becomes flat. So the direction that you're turning in, you should feel a nice arch in your foot, and the direction you're turning away from, you become quite flat-footed. And let's just move round and do that again. So the direction you're turning towards in your foot, do not let the big toe come off. It's very tempting when we do this, as we turn round, to let the knuckle, to let this part of the big toe come off, but we don't want that to happen, okay? So just turning around. My dog is going mental in the background. I have no idea if you can hear this. And we're just going to practice moving in and out of flat-footedness and arches, just literally by rotating our pelvis. So if you practice that for one moment, I'm just going to get rid of my dog. Okay, the amazing thing about lockdown is that you have to work with your family and your dog. Okay, so I hope already that's starting to give you an experience of how you yourself can create an arch in your foot, okay? So the foot that you turn towards with your knees locked, you're rotating your pelvis round, you can feel the arch, and that's actually your foot supinating. It's what we call supination. And then the other side, as if we turn away from that same foot and you feel it going flat, that's pronation, okay, where the foot is very flat. So that's the first thing that is a really good thing to play with in your body, especially if you've got foot pain. But then just noticing how when you do that movement, so when you rotate round, obviously what else is involved? So what's involved is my knees are rotating, my knees should be fully extended and locked, and you can feel that movement going right into your hips. So already we're feeling the connection between our hips and our feet. Yeah, when we rotate, we are rotating, and the impact of what's going on in our hips and how that immediately changes the positioning and the relationship of our feet with the ground. So this is just an exploration of how our body works. It's what I'm doing today is very, very simple, but it's about trying to get people to understand the connections between one part of the body and another part of the body. So we understand there, simply by rotating our pelvis, how we can create an arch or a flat foot. Okay? Now, what I want us to do is we're going to practice just tipping our pelvis backwards and forwards. So when we tuck our pelvis under, this is called a posterior tilt. And when we stick our bottom out, that's called an anterior tilt. So if you don't know anything about this, if you've never studied the pelvis, if you imagine the pelvis is a bowl, and when you stick your bottom out, water would be pouring out the front. When you tuck your bottom under, water might be pouring out the back. I know I've got people who I've trained with here who know exactly. Hi Albert, hi Tanya, hi Elaine, hi Christine. It's lovely to see you all here. Okay, so just doing this, doing that movement, I then again want you to connect with your feet. So when you stick your bottom out like that, again, keeping your feet hip width apart with your big toe and your second toe facing straight ahead, the same direction as your eyes on the horizon, sticking your bottom out, where do you start to feel the weight going down through your feet? Does it feel balanced? And now in contrast to that, when you stick your bottom under, where do you feel the weight going down through your feet? So for me, when I tuck my bottom under, I start to feel more weight going down through my heels. And if my bottom sticks out, I start to feel more weight going through the front of my feet. So again, coming back to this, all the time, simply by moving my pelvis, I may be changing all of the different experiences my feet have, simply by moving what's going on in my pelvis. Okay? So this is all part of the self-exploration that I want to encourage people, especially people who have no understanding of their bodies. I want to encourage people to do, especially at this time when people are having to take care of themselves more because they can't go to practitioners. It's like, well, how do you assess what's going on? So that's great. We know if we move our pelvis backwards and forwards, that maybe, just maybe, it affects where our weight is going down through our feet. But what then happens if we bend a leg? If our knee, rather than being completely extended and locked, what happens if we bend a leg? So if you look at this in the mirror, which you're not doing now because you're watching me, but if you watch this again and you look in the mirror, what you might notice is the moment you bend a knee, so the moment the leg isn't extended, your pelvis then rotates a bit. The hip of the bent leg will probably shift forward, not to the side, but it will just move forward, because if the knee's bending and the knee's moving forward, then the pelvis has to follow, because the knee and hip are simply either end of our thigh bone, our femur. So this is going to have a big impact. And then notice, just with that knee slightly bent, what's the weight doing through your feet? So at that point, you might start to experience you've got a bit more weight on the inside of your foot than on the outside. So if you're walking around and you never fully extend your knee, and you're just walking like this, and believe it or not, there are many people out there who, when they walk around, they never fully extend their knees, then you are forever going to be placing potentially more weight on the inside of the foot than the outside of the foot. Or if you're like a lot of clients that I see, you walk around and your feet are turned out, then it's very likely you're putting a lot more weight on the outside of your foot rather than the inside of your foot. So all of these things are having a knock-on effect. So if we just do that again, just bend the knee and feel the weight going down. And then, just for a moment, we can try something else. What happens is if even with that bent knee, you just move your weight onto the other leg with a fully straight knee, extended knee. So all your weight just shifts slightly onto the straight leg. Just notice what happens in that side of your body with the bent knee. Suddenly for me it feels quite airy, it feels quite spacious. And then just allow the weight to come back onto the bent knee, and notice how then suddenly you feel a lot more pressure on the foot of the bent knee. So this is just an exploration, because so much of this has a knock-on effect to what's going on further up the body. So if we just move between bending the different knees, okay, is that easy for you? Can you bend both knees quite easily? And then can you notice how your hips go up and down and up and down? But if when you walk you never fully straighten your legs, then your hips will never fully go up and down. So when we start to get pain in our lower back, one of the reasons can be because this movement, which is just a constant workout for some of our important muscles around the base of our spine, these movements that should potentially be happening every step we take, if you're a bit restricted and you don't do these, then actually it has a knock-on effect on your back. So, coming back to the pelvis, again we're now going to lock our knees and just allow the pelvis to rock backwards and forwards. And again, noticing very slowly how probably when we tuck it in, you might feel the weight in your feet, and when you stick it out, your bottom, you might feel more weight in the front of your feet. So now standing sideways, just notice what happens in my spine. And this is something you can try and assess in yourself, and there's no fixed rule. There's many things that can be affecting what's going on. But when my bottom's stuck out, can you see my spine is bent and it's extended, and my weight is very much at the front. And then when I tuck my pelvis under and my spine is flexed and I have more weight in my heels, does your spine do that movement? Do you bring that in to your movement very often? For people who are very aware of their bodies, they'd be doing this all of the time. But for a lot of people in chronic pain who come into my clinic, they barely access this. They might do that rather than be able to rotate their shoulders, extend their back, flex their back. So these are all things more and more I'm going to be looking at, especially while we're all in lockdown, because it's really important to keep moving and to understand and experience what our body can do. So I'm just going to come back to something that's very important, which is this movement. So one thing when I see clients come into my clinic a lot is that where their weight is distributing down through their body is having a very, very big impact on whether it's their back or their feet, their hips, just where that weight is distributing, okay? So I want to come back to bending the knee and bringing your weight onto your straight, fully extended, locked knee leg. So because I'm opposite, I'm on the camera, I'm not going into left and right, you can just mirror me, okay? Now what's very important with this is that when you do it, just to notice whether your weight is going down through the bent leg at all, or whether it's going down through your extended leg. And I want you to just start to have an experience of what does it feel like when nearly all of your weight is going down through your extended leg. Can you feel that sense of uprightness, of support, of momentum, that it's not an effort to put your weight down through the extended leg? Compared to, in contrast, if you now allow your weight just to shift onto the bent knee leg, do you feel a sense of, I feel heaviness, almost like a feeling of collapse. My foot feels far heavier. So just noticing what happens when all the weight from our upper body is sinking down through a bent leg compared to sinking down. Or it doesn't feel like it's sinking down. It feels like we're very supported when our weight goes down through our straight leg. And just have a sense of the effect that has on the back. So on the side of my body with the straight leg, all the way coming up through my body, I feel very supported when the weight's going down through the straight leg. Equally so, when both knees are fully extended, I feel supported. The moment I put my weight going down through the bent leg, if my feet are standing next to each other, it's more of a sense of collapse. So if there's one thing I'd like people to take from today, it's about the biomechanics and the different levels of support. So these things take time to integrate into the body, and it's easy to watch me doing it, but it's really important, as I say, to revisit this and to document it. So everything that I've just mentioned, which we've gone through, was about your arch on both feet. It was about whether your feet are turned in or facing forwards, and then looking at the way our pelvis is tilted backwards or forwards, whether our pelvis is going up or down. So when you've got a straight leg, your pelvis is tilted up on the straight leg side, and the bent leg, the pelvis will always be tilted down. And just noticing when you assess yourself, what movements are easy for you. Is it easy for you to hike on this side, but difficult to hike on that side? Is it easy? And for many of my clients, I notice it's very easy for them. They possibly live far too much in an anteriorly tilted pelvis, and it's actually very foreign and quite difficult for them to then just tuck under a little. And yet when they tuck under a little, suddenly all the weight distribution in their feet completely changes, and they feel far more balanced. And pain in their lower back, where it's feeling very tight, can maybe just release slightly. So all of this self-assessment is what you can be doing at home, but it's so important to look at yourself in a mirror while you're doing it. Now, that's the pelvis. We're quickly going to visit the rib cage. And when I work with people in my clinic and we start to help people self-assess the rib cage, it is possibly one of the hardest things to do. So to assess the rib cage, one good idea can be to sit down, because if you sit down, your pelvis can't move so easily. So if I ask people to tip their rib cage forward, and what I want you to notice here is when I'm tipping my rib cage forward, what I'm not doing is that, yeah? I'm not moving, not moving my shoulders. So I always want to keep my eyes on the horizon, and I just want my rib cage moving from my sternum to go forward and back. Now this is something that a lot of people find quite difficult because they take their head with them. They're like, yes, I'm tipping my rib cage forward and back, but actually they're simply flexing their spine. What you need to do is you need to keep your pelvis completely still, legs knees extended, your eyes on the horizon, they shouldn't need to move, and then your rib cage in isolation starts to move. And again, when you do that, just noticing in your feet what happens when you start to move your rib cage. So as I move forward, as my rib cage tips forward, have I got more weight in my heels or the front of my feet? As my rib cage tips back, have I got more weight in the back of my feet, front of my feet? And then just rotating. What's it like to rotate your rib cage? So, if you look at me now, I'm rotating my rib cage, but I am not doing that. My head is not going with me, my pelvis. So what we want is an isolated rib cage that can rotate. So can you do that? And then what we want is an isolated rib cage that can go up and down. And even though my shoulders are moving through space, what they're not doing is that. Yeah, it's not my shoulders moving independently of my rib cage. My shoulders just happen to be moving through space because they are attached to my rib cage. Okay, so we have front. It's hard when I'm watching the video to do this correctly because I mustn't watch the video when I'm doing this movement. But we've got the up and down, backwards, forwards. Then we've got the side to side. So with this, you're looking for an opening between your head and your shoulder on one side and a closing on the other. And what you'll start to experience is as your rib cage, like a seesaw, goes up like this, you get a lovely opening at the base of your rib cage, which is the top of your lower back. And you start to get a really nice release in there. But again, what you'll notice, the more you do this, is that it affects the weight in your feet. What's happening? Okay, so we've gone front to back, making sure that our clavicle bones are not doing it. It's coming from our sternum. Okay, we've rotated side to side, going round. Okay, and up and down. So how easy are those movements for you? Now, a lot of people want to get their belly involved in this. What I would suggest is really allow yourself to have a really lovely big flat belly, a big fat, not flat, fat belly. When you're doing this, just allow all the muscles around, above and beneath to relax. Okay. And finally, we have our head and our skull. So these movements are far more regular and normal for people to do, easier to isolate, although some people will, when they tip their head forward, they'll want to take their back with them, but just head on its own, backwards, forwards, side, 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 side. And just notice how easy or how difficult is this? Is there a feeling of restriction on one side or the other? And I'm going to come back and I'm going to do sessions specifically on each of these areas. At the moment, we're just doing a very quick run through just to give you some context of where we're going with all this. What's it like when you rotate round? Again, looking in a mirror, or get someone to film you doing these movements and then watch yourself back. Because our brain tricks us all the time into thinking we're moving in a particular way. Same with me, even doing this. There will be things that I think I'm doing one way, which when I look back, I'll be going, oh my goodness, I wasn't doing that. I thought I was doing that and I wasn't. So just rotating up and down, side to side. And just notice, so for me, when I tip my head in that direction, and it could even just be going like that, it has an immediate effect on my connection with the ground in my foot on that side. It kind of moves me a bit more inwards. But it takes time. It takes so much time to really understand what our body can and cannot do. Now, the point of all this is that if we have one restriction in any of these movements, then it has a knock-on effect on every single joint in the body. So my amazing teacher, who I learned some of this with, Gary Ward, he wrote this book, What the Foot, and he always taught us to treat the forest, not the tree. So if you've got a pain somewhere in your body and it's uncomfortable, then more than likely you will have always tried to move away from that point of pain rather than towards it. And when you move away from a point of pain, it impacts every other joint in your body. Everything else has got to maneuver itself to not put pressure on that point of pain. So what that then does is it creates or it restricts movements in other areas of your body. So the question is, if my hip on this side is down a bit and I rotate in that direction, I feel quite restricted, okay? It's putting excess weight on my foot on that side, and it's also restricting me when that knee's bent. If my hips are balanced, my knees are both extended, suddenly I can rotate a lot further, okay? So a slight movement of one joint immediately restricts me being able to rotate. Putting it back where it's in a more balanced place, immediately I can rotate a lot further. This conversation between our joints is going on all the time. Gary, I feel like Ricky Martin. That's so funny. All these restrictions, and we're going to start to look, I'm going to start to try and do more Facebook Lives when I can get quiet in my home, where we start to look at how different restrictions or different joints that are kind of a little bit blocked then have a knock-on effect on our movement. Okay? So has anyone watching got any questions about what we've been doing today? We've still got a few people watching. As I've said, the key is to document everything on a regular basis and to keep a little body assessment diary. So as I said, in case you got here late, I've created these little sheets for documenting your foot pressure. Okay, so when I say documenting foot pressure, I mean that you can put little marks on where you show where you feel you've got more weight going through your feet. Okay, and then we've also got, where's it gone? One of these sheets. So for example, I've put lines, but maybe today you'll feel that your pelvis was slightly, it was hiked on one side lower than the other. Maybe you could rotate, you could do a little curly. I'll do more of these, but you can try and mark which way it was rotating. Gary, I started cramping above my glutes on my right side. Is that normal? So I started cramping above my, yes. So Gary, if you spend a lot of time possibly anteriorly tilted and you start to move, or if you spend a lot of time posteriorly tilted, I mean, there are so many different reasons why you could start cramping. Also because when you start to move your pelvis, your hamstrings also, if they're quite short or if they're long, we're starting to move everything in a very different way. So all of these things are what you need to document, and then that's why you Fred, wrong way around to read. Fred, so just to come back to Gary, it's so many different things can happen when you start to wake up the body, when you start to do these different movements, and when you start to see them happening, then we have to have a conversation about the why is that happening. Is it because of muscle restrictions or joint restrictions above or below? You know, we really need to have a conversation, and that's where I want to get a conversation going on here and maybe set up a group. I need to decide what I'm going to do, because I see, and I know so many of my colleagues see so many pain conditions where, for example, as a clinical massage therapist, we might be able to release it from someone's body, but then if people go out and they continue to move in a particular way, if their pelvis is up, if their pelvis is down, if they never fully extend one of their knees, if they're walking around with one shoulder up, most people are, but basically so many different things, and everyone is unique. Everyone's body is literally a walking history of every experience that they've had. So we have to look at, you know, why doesn't my knee fully extend? Why is one hip higher than the other? Why can't I? I mean, this is, in my experience, this one in the rib cage is one of the biggies. Very few people naturally can rock their rib cage backwards and forwards without moving their head. So all of these things cause a restriction, which then when we start to move could cause cramp, could create a pain, a symptom of something somewhere else. There is no wrong, there is no right with any of this. Must admit, Elaine, I'm aching on my right side. So the more, if you come back and watch this, and we're going to do more of these, and we will focus on each area, okay? The more we will understand what we're doing. This has been really great, Victoria, really helpful. Thanks so much for all your help. Okay, so what we have learnt today is we've learnt a little bit about foot placement, okay? So ideally, when you're assessing your body, just like your eyes should always be on the horizon to move forward, so should your feet, your big toe, and your second toe. Ideally, this is when you're assessing yourself, ideally have them facing forward. If it's uncomfortable, that's really good information for you to know, okay? So we've learnt about foot placement, we've learnt about posture, where our pelvis is, where our rib cage is, where our head is, what they're doing affects the way the weight moves down into our feet, okay? And we've learnt about joint motion. So with joint motion, what we've seen is that as we move our joints, we affect all the balance in our body and the way our muscles work. So what Gary said is, basically he's done that and he's started to feel cramps. So he's basically woken something up and the muscles have gone, what's going on? We don't usually do this. We don't know how to do this. So it's just starting to understand the connections between the joints, our posture, and the way our feet connect with the ground. So how have people found that? Anyone got any comments before we finish? Is there any questions that people would like to have an answer to? If you'd like me to get a copy of these to you, then do message me, because this is a diary. This is how you make your self-assessment posture diary, okay? And I've got these as PDFs. I will try and transcribe what we've done in here on this Facebook Live today. I know there's a 30-second delay, so I'm just going to wait to see if anyone says anything else. So what I will be doing is coming back and doing more of these sessions. And if you've got any questions, really useful information. Thanks, Gary. And there's loads more we can do. I'm aware with Gary, for example, there's certain things. We're going to look at the upper body. We're going to look at arms, because what do our arms have to do with all of this? How are they connected? Fred, you'd love a copy. Okay, I'll get a copy to you, Fred. You know, what happens when we rotate our wrists? How does that affect our upper body? How does that go down? So that's something we're going to look at as well. All right, everyone. So I'm going to come back next week and do another session, but hopefully today you have learned a little bit, and it would be really interesting if you go back and you watch this again, or if you have any private questions, then please do feel free to get in touch with me and we can discuss what's going on. I also offer the option of getting someone to take a video of you moving, of doing these things, and I can have a look at it to see how your body's moving. But as I say, it can be different on different days. Elaine, great. I've had bad posture for years, so this is helpful. Thanks, Elaine. Good. I'm pleased it's helpful, and it's really, really essential to start with getting our understanding our foot placement and the relationship our feet have with the ground. Okay, everyone. So I will be back next week, and we will look a lot more at the pelvis and the spine, and how they move, and the impact that has, how other parts of the body need to move in relation to the spine. Okay, have a great day. Bye bye.